for, whatever it may be, you guys provide like, hey, we've done this 100 times, here are the things we recommend, here are the things we don't, these are what we would say you should look at or consider, and versus the things we don't, you know.
Right. And actually, we talked about that specific thing, and, I think the direction was, hey, make sure we're not doing anything, that dumb or, or that we shouldn't be doing. So yeah, we will provide our recommendations of what we think is the best value or the best engineering. But in the end, it's your road, and we're going to give you what you guys want. Give you, there's flex. We can give you our opinion and let you know what we think is best, but we also don't want to just tell you what to do. Give you the opportunity to have options.
And as an example, we're doing a 12-inch water line project in Princeton right now, where we're adding sidewalk on top of our water line. And the Director of Public Services says, I don't want that sidewalk right on the right-of-way line, I want to move over closer to the road. Well, it's a road with no curb. So we went back in and looked at the design this morning, and I emailed him and said, listen, we can do that, but I do not recommend it for safety reasons. And he emailed back and said, that's good enough. He was just trying to keep him kind of work on private property, because he has to work with property owners. But it just didn't make any sense, because it's an open ditch situation as well. So we look at, we're going to listen, but we're going to give you our professional recommendation on anything you want us to look at.
I think the key there, Eric, is what Todd said, is recommendations. Right? They'll give us options,
Right.
And have a preferred one, and then walk us through.
I mean, the biggest, so one of the issues, I'll give you an example of an issue that came up in the last, maybe unhappy, and that's like, when you start excavating, you don't know what's out there. We excavated, and there was a pipe running across the road. There was a 4-inch pipe running under the road, going from one side of the street to the other. Don't know why it was there. Don't know when it was there, but it was over in the street, running from one side to the other. Well, the engineering firm put it back and poured the concrete over the top. And after I said, what does it do? Oh, we don't know. Why did you put it back? Why did we pay to put it back? Well, because it was there. Well, that's stupid. Why didn't you tell me? And we could have figured out why that was there. So I've tasked them, that's part of what we're trying to do is, if just because the pipe diagonals across the intersection, I want them and us sitting and saying, is it exactly what we want to put back there? I know it's there, but it is, and so that's why I want them, and that's part of our things was, it's not a paint by numbers thing. This is something where we not only want to do it right, but if there's something we can improve, let's improve it while we're there. Don't just, and over here, a lot of it, it was complacency because it was so straight, and it was kind of like on autopilot. They would just put stuff back that had no reason being there. So that's what I mean, like, don't let us do something dumb, and don't let us waste money on something that has no purpose.
There are lots of instances over here on this side of town where there's culverts under people's driveways that do absolutely nothing. So we're not going to recommend. And I realize you all have an ordinance that says every driveway has to have a culvert, and that's something that you all have to change because the ordinance exists, but we'll make a recommendation. If there's no reason for a culvert to be under a driveway, there's no reason to put it back spending money. And the same situation on some of the cul-de-sacs where the drainage, and we'll know more once we get surveyed, but when we drove it, the drainage is a very, yeah. Because it was crazy the way the drainage was originally designed, and we will make recommendations to straighten that sort of stuff out. I mean, you guys are surrounded by a lake, right? So the water should run away from the road to the lake everywhere we can and not carry a bunch of water in the ditches. Because anytime you just subgrade wet, it's not good. It starts to pump. And it's not wet all the time, but we'll make drainage recommendations to help that situation as well.
Everybody understand? Have a calendar? Now, I'll just say this real quick. So, when you borrow money, you make your bond payments in February and in August. You make the principal payment, the big payment is always in February. Whenever all the cities issue bonds, you pay them in February and you pay them in August. Why do you make the big payment in February? You get your taxes in December and January, so you make the payment in February. So, if we started the roads in August, our first bond payment is February. if we start them in March, it's February. So it's gonna be February anyway, so what we wanna do is definitely wanna start the roads, if we could, basically in February, so we get a whole year of the bond money sitting in the bank. Because you get the bond money up front. You cannot start a road project until you have the funds in hand. That's the law. So all that money is gonna be sitting in the bank, making interest, until we have to start making, we make the payment. So that's kind of how you're working backwards. Why February is key to kind of the process. You don't really want to start a road, for our size, you don't want to start a road project in June, because it's just not a good plan. So that's why the calendar is so tight. That's why we're working backwards to get back to where we need to be.
So with the strategic timeline, is that, how often does that move quicker or slower than what's laid out there?
We can, our design, we can staff up and push that design faster. I don't anticipate it taking longer than this, but,
I guess where are the hiccups that would typically delay something that we could push this past February? I guess there wouldn't be a need to be forcefully do something early, or is there?
just really the geotech and the survey, if there's any delay in that because of weather or something with the lab or getting in their schedule, but I don't, can you think of?
The surveyors are all about 3 weeks out now from the day you give them an authorization to proceed with work that they have already in the queue, if you will. So and it's been pretty steady for the last 6 months, about 3 weeks. Now, when we get a week of rain, then they try to compress that, and the schedule can move around a bit depending on the weather itself. But if the weather stayed like it is now, we're 3 weeks. If we were to order a survey tomorrow, it would be 3 weeks before they could get here. So we have to work within their workload as well.
But, the other thing for the council is that, remember, we got a lot of stuff, that's their timeline. We gotta blow up Meadow Lake, we gotta, figure out the mailboxes, we gotta get stuff moved, we gotta get our side ready for when they're ready. We gotta get the new water line in Meadow Lake, because we're not gonna blow up driveways until right before this thing happens. So that's one of the advantages of working off their timeline, is that gives us our timeline for, all of our things we gotta get done in-house. We gotta figure out where our well's gonna go, where it may go in the future, we gotta pin that down.
And there's some structures that need to be moved. I think it's obvious because of where existing mailboxes are setting and where existing landscape is setting in some places that needs to be moved prior to. I mean, the surveyors can go out and pick it all up, but it's gonna have to be moved. We can either include that as a demolition item in this project or have it taken care of prior to. So there's some planning I think we need to think about around that as well.
Liz, you have any questions? You've already been through it. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about, if there's, everybody's got the calendar down, it kind of sees, all the steps that are involved. So later on, I'll talk to you, the financing is not nearly as long. The steps in the financing, there's about 5 steps, but you do that much later kind of in the process. You can't arrange financing today. No, it doesn't make any sense. That obviously is time sensitive, and that happens much closer. So one of the things that I would, Todd, do you have a copy of the updated task order? You have? Okay, this is everybody. This is the. So what this is, so when we engage the engineer, we have task orders. So they write up the task order, a do not exceed cost, and then we as a council discuss whatever. And then you authorize me to sign the paperwork and authorize them to proceed. So we have to do that for individual tasks. So if you look in this project order, the key item, so what this is saying is what they will do. So like in the bidding, they'll have 7 copies of this and they will handle phone calls. And this is literally laying out what the scope of their engagement is, okay? What they're going to do, they're not going to move our mailboxes. That's not in the scope task number 2. Task number 2 is about surveying or whatever. So it really demarcates clearly who's got what. And so that's what these task orders are, and they break down the different tasks. So, so one of the things that, that this is, if you go to kind of the second to the last page, it's got basically 4 different tasks here. There's the topographic survey, the geotech, plans and contract documents, and then there's the bidding services. So this is basically the scope of their work. This is what they're going to do. And these are basically the do not exceed numbers. So they'll be pretty close to these numbers as we move forward. It's got a number here of 360 is the total lump sum fee, which looks like the whole, that's for everything. And that, what that doesn't include is the QA/QC, right?
The construction administration.
Construction, right. So this is everything to get the concrete rolling, and then there would be an additional fee for them to be out here 2 days a week, or 1 hour every other morning, or to review the cylinder breaks. And you know, if the contractor wants to do a change order, they'll come out. You know, they'll evaluate it, and then typically the engineers will make recommendations that yes, make progress payment number 3. They're at that point. You can make that payment. So we wait for them to verify that they've hit the milestones that we made progress payments on. So that's part of that administration. Okay, so you know, those are the different steps that we kind of have, and that's their roles to play in this. When it comes to the QA/QC, and I forget I forget actually what we did with FNI, but
It was actually, we used them.
you know, and it was a dial we turn. We get to pick. Like they said, what do you want? You want us here like 3 hours? You know, literally you could have said, I want you 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But there's nothing to do. So we picked, where they were here, I think every other day, or they were like every day, probably at the very beginning.
I think it was every day.
At the beginning.
At the start of the construction day, review previous and next plans.
Yeah.
What are you generally looking at when you're doing that?
Coach, we're looking at as they're pouring concrete, and we're looking at the rebar, and just generally that they're not trying to get away with something, they're following the plans and specifications.
Just another set of eyes.
It's
They're the
basically
inspector.
watching the construction,
Right.
whether or not.
And a lot of it is just the shop drawings and the pay estimates, and just the administration, just kind of paperwork type stuff, and making sure that everything is documented, and, all the cylinder breaks, that we've got that documented, because if there is a problem, then we need to have a good record of the cylinder breaks, and, well, this didn't beat, or, whatever. Making sure that all the testing is being done appropriately, and the materials, geotech, air construction is being coordinated.
I think almost nearly every day too, the construction firm had a question for the engineer too. There's always something that clarifies something on the drawing. Because once they get going, you'll remember this, right? It was like Crest was tore up from the start to the end.
Yeah.
So it's questions all over where they're doing culverts and crossings and removing subgrade, compaction, silver breaks. There's always interpretation. It was hard. I'm pretty sure he was here once a day for at least the first.
I know at the beginning he was. He was there every single day at the very beginning.
That would be pretty standard, that to start construction, there's gonna be a lot of, and then that tapers off as the town and the engineer and the contractor are all getting along, and it looks like things are progressing, then, it may not need to be every day type of thing. And it, like Mark said, this is just, it's as you need it and as you direct us, we'll be out here, and if you, as much as you guys wanna take on yourself, then you can take on as much as you need us, we'll assist in whatever you guys need. It's really just a not to exceed number down here. And we just use a similar assumptions and amount of time that were done on the last contract to come up with the amount of hours for this. So that's probably on the high end, I would anticipate what would actually be used for that phase of the project.
Everybody knows what a cylinder break is?
Listing of the concrete that they poured an extra piece or something
Like
like that.
was it every 500 feet or? I don't know.
Typically it's every 500 feet, or sometimes it may be done on every
300?
certain
Truck.
truck. Right.
200 cubic yards or,
So they have to pour right out of their truck, the same thing you're
Right.
pouring.
So
They
they'll
pour
pour,
like 5 of them or 6 of them or
they'll pull
something.
4 or 5, and then typically they're exactly that, they're a cylinder, and they take it to a lab, and they've got a machine that smashes it to test the compressive strength. So you do that 3 days, 7 days, because concrete cures over concrete's continually curing, so it's developing strength. And so you're just kind of checking, you get that 3-day, and if it's super low or super high, then it's kind of like an initial, well, something's wrong, let's hold up, let's stop, and then you do it at 7, and then 28 days is when the typical design strength needs to be met. And if it's not there, I mean, there's problems if it's too high, and there's problems if it's too low. You know, there's kind of a range that you want to be in, so you're looking at all those to make sure that you don't want to get too far down the road, so to speak, and then have to rip it up and rip up a lot of other stuff to get back to fixing.
But they would do things like, you know, the cylinder or the 3, you couldn't cross the concrete. That's why you had to park on the opposite side of the street until it got to 3,000 PSI. Then you could scoot across it to get to your driveway. But we couldn't open up the lane and drive down it until we got to, you know, 3,500 PSI or something. You know, that's what all these cylinder breaks are. So you can imagine every 500 feet or whatever, and there's a 3-day, the 5-day, but this is the 5-day on the 3, you know, this is the one that was, you know, I don't want to see that spreadsheet. I saw it, and it was enough dealing. I was like, I don't want to deal with the spreadsheet. I don't need to know that, you know, the 7-day after 5 days is 12-day. And it's like, oh crap, which one was that again? And so, you know, that's their job.
I think the other thing there that was kind of subtle too is Kimberly Horn shared with us too, right? So if those cylinder brakes go bad, that's not our job. That's their job to go deal with the contractor and make the decision. They're gonna come back to us and say, you know, it failed, we recommend rip it up. Rip it up.
and
Is that ever an
depending on the
issue?
severity of it, you all could choose to keep the concrete section, but the contractor then pays you back. So
When that's in the
if we did
contract, if we say,
it's in the contract
we
specifications.
failed and you gotta dig it up, then they gotta
Then
dig
they
it
gotta
up.
dig it up. We just, in Princeton, we had a contractor take out an entire subdivision, and he wasn't happy.
No kidding.
But they poured 7,000 PSI or somewhere at the batch plant. And when they do those subdivision streets, they slip form them, and they start and they're folding their cylinders, and they can do an entire subdivision in a matter of days.
So what's the problem if it's too high?
It's just, they didn't get the curing competent. It's really not, if they had cured it properly, it wouldn't have been an issue, but it was so hot. It was hot outside, and the concrete was really hot, and it cracked everywhere.
Okay.
It didn't crack just in the joints where it's supposed to. It didn't crack in the socket. We saw cut concrete, because concrete's gonna crack, right? It's not good concrete, but it does crack. So we put saw cuts in there so that we control the cracking. And you'll see on the streets that have been poured, every 20 feet, 30 feet, whatever it is, that there's a joint cut, an eighth of an inch thick, so that they contact. And you seal it, so you control the cracking. This cracked everywhere. We had 5 or 6 cracks the entire width of the street in one pan. And so we had to pull it all out, and they weren't happy.
No, I imagine not.
But the key takeaway there is that that's something that we're paying for with Kimberly Horn. That's, they're managing that, they're doing that for us, that's something we don't have to decide.
They took 2 months to actually get out here. They had to finish the They started like June.
Most of the bids to the actual cost you guys get, you track that with plus or minus margin?
We try, we never want to be the low bidder.
Right.
So, but we have, I mean, we have an extensive amount of engineers working in this market, and we keep a database on bids that have been opened, so that our opinions of probable construction costs, we pride ourselves on getting those really, really close.
So
They're usually like about an average,
Yeah.
but every bid is just so different. And the construction community is very aggressive right now, so we've seen some recent bids where we were right in the middle, and every was pretty close, but then the low bid was 20% less than everyone else, and it's just because they're new in town and they want to get a foot in the door, and you know, it's hard to.
They have availability.
that's also something they fact check, right, too, right? So we have to accept the low bidder. But if the bid is too low, then that's something, that's a criteria that can actually rule that contractor out. I mean, they can, like Todd said, right, you can underbid it, but at the end of the job, if they can't financially make any money on it, that's high risk.
I think my recollection of the numbers was the total cost from F&I was 1.6, total borrow 1.6 million. And the winning bid was $1,591,000. That was the winning bid, so it was pretty close. And we got it pretty close. You know.
There may have been some game show games, I'm sure.
Okay. And so for the council, you've seen so we've talked about it. So what I want to do in February is I'm going to come to you and I'm going to ask you for authorization, probably to do the geotech work, start on the geotech work. And we'll talk about geotech and survey work. Basically, we need to start moving. And now you've kind of seen it, so now you understand what that is. So next council meeting, we're going to tee that up.
Mayor, if you need us back to that meeting, just let us know. We won't have to come back.
Okay. Is there any questions? Danny, you got any? Good? Dan, do you have any questions? Good.
Executive session.
Is there an executive session on here? There's no executive session on here.
I think we're at F, Mayor.
I think, are we done?
There was one on there to delete it.
Oh, I didn't see it. I was on the phone. No, we won't. Okay, reports. Cindy, got anything? Okay.
Motion adjourned.
Motion from Cliff to adjourn. Do I have a second?
She seconded before we would finish making the motion.
We're trying to be.
Give me a
polite.
reputation.
You can tell we want to get out.
I have a reason today.
My roads are done.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Yeah,
Opposed? All right.
yeah, they were, the only part was with mine,
How you doing?
Oh, I didn't like it.
because my driveway went all the way around this way.
It's,
Had a
no,
slope.
it's an early meeting. I told you to
They did the driveway.
Poor Matt probably
They
got
cut it even shorter, so much fun.
it.
It's back.
Thank you. You're welcome.
That was the only thing.
The number's still bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Were there extras of those maps? Were there extras of those maps up there?
I don't know, Mark gave me one.
You can look at it.
I think there's some up there.
Oh, you and your kid.
I know.
He called me.
Well, it's-